Dante Ricci did not do hospitals. He did not do white walls or paper gowns or the specific kind of quiet that settles over a building where people go to find out something is wrong with them. He did not do the smell, that sharp, chemical nothing smell that sits at the back of your throat and refuses to leave. He did not do the fluorescent lights or the clipboards or the way doctors looked at you like you were a problem they had not yet decided how to classify. He did not do any of it. More than that, he did not do vulnerability. Not in any form. Not in a boardroom, not in a back room, not in the kind of meetings that never made it into any public record. For 12 years, Dante Ricci had sat at the head of every table he had ever walked into, and he had never once allowed anyone in that room to see something they could use. Not a waver. Not a hesitation. Not a single moment where the man across from him could look back later and say, there. Right there. That was the crack. There had never been a crack. And he most certainly did not do the past. The past was a room he had locked from the outside, pocketed the key, and walked away from without looking back. He had made that choice 8 years ago on a night he did not think about, in an apartment he had not returned to, for reasons that had calcified so completely inside his chest that he had stopped being able to distinguish them from the shape of his own ribs. He did not think about that night. He did not think about her. So when Dante Ricci found himself in the back of a black sedan at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, being driven across the city to a hospital he had never set foot in, it was not because he had chosen any of this. It was because the alternative was worse. Because 3 hours earlier, in the middle of a sit-down with the Calabrese family that had taken 6 weeks to arrange, with 4 of his senior men in the room and 3 of theirs and a deal on the table that would restructure port access from the harbor district all the way north to the shipping corridor, in the middle of all of that, his vision had gone. Not completely. Not all at once. It had started at the edges, the way ink bleeds into wet paper, slow and then suddenly everywhere. The voices in the room had started to stretch, like someone had reached into the audio and pulled. And then there had been a sound, high, thin, a frequency that belonged to nothing, and then the floor had come up to meet him faster than physics should have allowed, and then there was nothing at all. He had been on the floor for 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Marco had timed it. Marco Serafini had been with Dante for 11 years, had seen things in those 11 years that would have ended lesser men. Had sat in rooms where the silence before a decision landed felt like a physical weight pressing down on the table, and he had never, not once in 11 years, looked the way he had looked when Dante opened his eyes and found him crouched on the floor 3 inches from his face, phone in his hand, speaking to someone in a voice that was trying very hard to sound like. Everything was fine. It was not fine. The Calabrese men had been standing. That was the detail that Dante's mind had snagged on, the detail that had lodged in his chest and stayed there for the entire 40-minute drive across the city. Not their expressions, concern mixed with something else, something that sat closer to calculation than sympathy. Not the fact that Luca Calabrese had already been reaching for his coat before Dante was fully upright. Not the handshake that didn't happen, the deal that didn't close, the 6 weeks of groundwork dissolving in the time it took his body to decide it was done. Just the standing. The fact that they had all been on their feet, looking down. In his world, a man on the floor was an invitation. Marco had called it a blood pressure episode. Had said the word dehydration with enough confidence that 3 of the 4 Calabrese men had nodded and found somewhere else to direct their eyes. The 4th had not nodded. The 4th, a man named Enzo who ran security for the family and who Dante had always found slightly too observant for everyone's comfort, had watched Dante get to his feet with an expression that was already doing math. That had been 3 hours ago. Now Marco was in the front seat, not talking, which was its own kind of communication. The partition between them was down, which meant this was not a situation that called for the usual separation of concerns. Marco had his phone in his hand and was not looking at it. "Third time," Dante said. "I know. This month. I know." Outside the window, the city was doing what it always did at midnight, running on a lower setting, the lights still on but the volume turned down, the streets carrying a different kind of traffic, the kind that moved faster and stopped less. Dante watched it go by without really seeing it. "The place you found," he said. "Tell me again." "Meridian Private. Gunmound District, North Side. They handle sensitive cases. Politicians. Names that don't show up in normal intake systems." Marco finally looked at the phone. "They have a full neurological unit on the 7th floor. Private elevator. Keycard access. No public registry. Who knows we're going? You and me." Dante looked at the back of Marco's head for a moment. Then he looked back out the window. "I want to be in and out in 2 hours," he said. "I need a certificate. Something I can put in front of the Calabreses and the Venetian crew both. Something that says whatever happened tonight was a one-time event." Marco was quiet for exactly long enough to be saying something without words. "What?" Dante said. "Nothing." "Marco. It is the 3rd time this month." A pause. "That is not a one-time event." Dante did not answer. The sedan turned off the main road onto a tree-lined street that climbed slightly as it approached the hospital, the building sitting behind high walls and older trees that had been there long enough to look like they were keeping a secret. The lobby windows threw pale light across the courtyard. The whole place had the specific energy of money that did not need to announce itself. The woman who met them at the entrance had a name badge and the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen enough unusual arrivals at unusual hours that this one barely registered. She led Dante to a private elevator that required a keycard to call and another to operate and said nothing during the 30-second ride except 7th floor. VIP wing. Dr. Okafor will see you shortly. The 7th floor was quieter than the lobby. His footsteps made no sound on the carpet. A nurse at the reception desk, older, with the kind of sharp eyes that came from years of seeing through exactly the kind of composure Dante was currently performing, told him room 3 without looking up from her screen. Room 3 was what he had expected. Examination table. Blood pressure equipment. A desk with a computer that probably cost less than the chair he sat in at his own office. Everything white, chrome, and calibrated. He sat on the edge of the table and began composing, in his head, the version of this conversation that ended in 20 minutes with the right document signed. He had a number already prepared. He was not going to open with it, that was amateur, but it was there, available, the way a particular kind of argument is always available when you know the argument is going to be necessary. He did not plan to be here long. The door opened. And whatever Dante Ricci had been preparing to say, whatever calculation, whatever number, whatever version of the next 20 minutes he had been building in the car and in the elevator and in the 12 steps down the carpeted hallway, it did not survive the first half second. Because the woman who stepped through the door was not what he had been expecting. She was holding a tablet. She was wearing a white coat with her name embroidered in dark thread above the breast pocket. Her hair was different, shorter than he remembered, close against her head, and she was moving with the specific, unhurried efficiency of someone who had 15 other things to do tonight and had organized them in order of priority before she walked through this door. She was not looking at him yet. She was reading something on the tablet, and for one full second, maybe two, Dante was the only one in the room who understood what was happening. Then she looked up. The next 4 seconds did not contain any sound that Dante was consciously aware of. There was probably still air moving through the ventilation system. There were probably still voices somewhere down the hall. The city was probably still running on its midnight setting outside the window. But inside room 3 on the 7th floor of Meridian Private Hospital, the 4 seconds that followed Dr. Serena Okafor looking up from her tablet and finding Dante Ricci sitting on her examination table were completely, specifically, surgically silent. Her expression did not change. That was the thing. Not a flicker. Not a sharp intake of breath or a blink that lasted half a second too long. Nothing that a person watching from outside would have been able to point to and say, there, that was the moment she recognized him. She looked at him the way she had presumably looked at every patient who had come through that door tonight. Steady. Clinical. A professional assessing a situation. She looked back down at the tablet. scrolled something, stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind her. "Mr. Ricci," she said, in perfect, unaccented Korean, and then switched without hesitation to Italian-inflected English when she clocked the slight tension in his jaw, the tell he had never completely eliminated. "I see you have been experiencing syncopal episodes. Your intake form lists 3 occurrences in the past 30 days. She was still reading the tablet. "When did the first one occur?" Dante's mouth was doing something he did not have instructions for. "Serena," he said. "Dr. Okafor." She looked up. Not with heat. Not with coldness. With the particular neutrality of a person who had made a decision about this conversation before they walked in and was not going to be moved from it by anything as insufficient as the sound of their own first name. "We are in a clinical setting, Mr. Ricci. I am your physician. You are my patient. Those are the only roles that are operational in this room." She looked back at the tablet. "When did the first episode occur?" He could have left. The door was 3 feet behind her. Marco was somewhere on this floor or in the lobby below. The sedan was still in the courtyard. There was no physical mechanism keeping him in this room. He stayed. 5 weeks ago," he said. "Location?" "My office." "What were you doing when it began?" "A meeting." She made a note. "What did you experience in the seconds before you lost consciousness?" "My vision blurred. The edges first." He watched her write. "Then it spread. There was a sound, I don't know how to describe it. High-pitched. Then nothing." "Duration of each episode?" "The first 2 I don't know exactly. Tonight was 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Something moved in her face at that, not emotion, but the professional equivalent of attention sharpening." She made another note. Set the tablet on the desk. Turned to face him fully for the first time since she had walked in. "I need to examine your cardiovascular and neurological baseline," she said. "Remove your jacket and shirt." He did not move. Her right eyebrow lifted exactly 1 degree. "Mr. Ricci, I have 14 other patients on this floor tonight. If you would prefer a different physician, I can arrange a referral. You will be seen by whoever is on call in the general wing, and your intake will be processed through the standard system." A pause. "Which means it will be on record." He removed his jacket. She stepped forward with a stethoscope. The metal was cold against his chest and she said "breathe normally" in the same tone she would have used to say it to anyone. He could smell something, not perfume, something lighter, the kind of scent that belonged to a person rather than a bottle, and it hit him with a force that was entirely disproportionate to its subtlety, the way the smallest specific sensory detail will sometimes reach past every defense a person has built and put its hand directly on something they thought they had buried years ago. He breathed normally. She moved the stethoscope. Listened. Moved it again. Her face was close enough that he could see the particular concentration she wore when she was processing information, a slight stillness in everything except her eyes, which moved in the way eyes move when they are reading something the rest of the body has gone quiet for. He remembered that expression. He had seen it across library tables and in the margins of textbooks and in the particular quality of silence that preceded her saying something that was usually either exactly right or about to require a 45-minute conversation. "Heart sounds are normal," she said. She stepped back. "Lungs are clear. I'm going to take your blood pressure." The cuff tightened. She watched the numbers. Said elevated in the same tone she had said everything else. "You are going to tell me that is situational," he said. "I am going to tell you that elevated blood pressure in conjunction with recurring syncopal episodes and a reported prodrome of visual disturbance and auditory changes warrants a full workup." She removed the cuff. Made notes. Did not look at him. "I am ordering an MRI, an EEG, a full cardiac panel, and blood work. The imaging alone will take 2 to 3 hours. I told you I need a certificate. I heard you. I need documentation that tonight was an isolated incident." She turned from the desk. And for the first time in the 20 minutes since she had walked through the door, what was in her face was not clinical neutrality. It was not warm. It was not cold. It was the specific expression of a person who has prepared for a version of this moment, has decided exactly what they are and are not willing to do, and is now delivering their decision with the complete absence of apology. I do not sign documentation I cannot support with evidence, she said. That is not a negotiating position. It is not a response to whoever you are outside this room or whatever leverage you believe that represents. It is a fact about the way I practice medicine. She held his gaze. I took an oath. I have not broken it in 9 years. I will not break it tonight. The number he had prepared in the car sat in his chest and used. You understand what I need that document for, he said, and his voice had gone quiet in the way it went quiet when he was deciding something. I understand what you believe you need it for, she said. What you actually need is a diagnosis. And a treatment plan. And probably 3 days of monitored observation before I can give you anything in writing that a serious person would take seriously. She picked up the tablet again. Someone will come to take you for the MRI in 15 minutes. There is a gown on the chair. She was already at the door. Serena. She stopped. Did not turn. How long have you been in the city? A pause that lasted precisely long enough to be an answer in itself. 7 years, she said. He absorbed that. 7 years. The city was not small, but it was not infinite either. His organization moved through it the way water moves through a landscape, and to every low point, along every channel, aware of most things that moved within its boundaries. And for 7 years, Serena Okafor had been living inside those boundaries without his knowing. Why here, he said. Now she turned. And what was in her face when she turned was something he did not have a clean word for, a careful, controlled expression that was doing a great deal of work. I did not come back, she said. I moved forward. There is a difference. She opened the door. Put on the gown. We are already behind schedule. The door closed. Dante sat in the examination room holding a paper gown that crinkled when he breathed and stared at the space she had just vacated and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a man who had walked into a room without fully understanding what room it was. Before you keep watching, if you are already in this story and you need to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens in the next 48 hours in that hospital is not something you are going to want to miss. The MRI took 40 minutes. The EEG took another hour. The blood work was done by a technician who said nothing except the clinical minimum and moved with the particular efficiency of someone running behind on their rounds. By the time Dante was back in room 3, in a hospital gown that was exactly as undignified as he had expected, it was past 3 in the morning and the floor had gone to its deepest quiet. He had been alone for 45 minutes when the door opened. Serena came in with a different tablet, thicker, the results loaded, and sat in the chair across from him. She did not position herself at the desk. She pulled the chair to a spot that was equidistant between the desk and the examination table and sat with her legs crossed and the tablet resting against her knee, and she looked at him with an expression that had shifted slightly from what it had been earlier. Still professional. Still calibrated. But something in the calibration had adjusted. Like a piece of equipment that had been running a diagnostic and had arrived at a finding it had not entirely anticipated. Everything came back normal, she said. Then I am healthy. Physically, yes. She set the tablet on her knee. Your brain structure is unremarkable. No lesions, no vascular abnormalities, no seizure activity on the EEG. Your cardiac function is excellent. Your blood work shows nothing that would account for 3 syncopal episodes in 30 days. He waited. Which means, she continued, that the episodes are not coming from your body. Then what are they coming from? Your brain. She held up a hand before he could respond. Your brain is an organ. It is not separate from your body. When it registers a level of psychological stress that exceeds its threshold, it initiates a shutdown. A circuit breaker. The clinical term is psychogenic syncope, vasovagal episodes triggered by emotional or psychological stimulation rather than physical pathology. She paused. Your body is not failing. Your nervous system is performing an emergency stop. The room was very quiet. You are telling me, Dante said, that I am blacking out because of my feelings. I am telling you that your brain is protecting you from something you have not given it permission to process. She did not smile, but something in her face shifted a millimeter toward it before correcting back. Those are not the same statement. What is the treatment? Identification of triggers. Controlled exposure. Stress regulation techniques. In some cases, therapy. She watched his face. In all cases, honesty. He looked at her for a long time. I came here for a certificate, he said. I know. Not for whatever this is. I know that too. She uncrossed her legs. Leaned forward slightly. Mr. Ricci. Dante. The name came out with a careful weight, like she had picked it up and examined it before deciding to use it. You have blacked out 3 times in 30 days. Once in front of people who will use that information. The next time it happens, you may not be in a room where Marco Serafini is the first person to reach you. She let that sit. I am recommending a 3-day monitored stay. We identify the triggers. We address them. At the end of 3 days, if the treatment shows measurable progress, I will sign a fitness report that I can stand behind. 3 days. 3 days. He looked at the window. The city was still out there, doing its midnight arithmetic, making its moves, counting its losses and its gains. Somewhere across the city, Luca Calabrese was probably already on the phone with someone, running calculations about what a man on the floor meant for the architecture of their arrangement. Somewhere, Enzo was probably writing things down. If I am not here, he said, someone will notice. People notice absence, Serena said. They adapt to it. What they do not recover from is a pattern of unpredictable collapse. She stood. I will have the nurses prepare a room. Serena. She stopped at the door. And this time the pause before she turned was different from the one in the hallway, different from the one when he had asked how long she had been in the city. This pause had something held carefully inside it. She turned. Why are you doing this? He said. You could have referred me. You said so yourself. The pause that followed was not long. But it was the kind of pause that a person fills with something they have already decided not to say, and Serena Okafor filled it, and then said something else instead. Because you are my patient, she said. And I protect my patients. A beat. Even from themselves. The door closed. Dante sat in the paper gown in the white room and did not move for a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and called Marco. I need a bag, he said. Close for 3 days. And cancel everything non-essential through Thursday. Marco was quiet for 3 seconds, which was a long time for Marco. How non-essential is the Verona sit-down? Cancel it. Another pause. Boss. Can I ask? No, Dante said. Bring the bag. Come alone. He hung up. Set the phone on the examination table beside him. Looked at the door she had walked through. In 12 years of running an organization that required him to read rooms, read people, read the specific language of what was said and what was carefully not said. In 12 years of being in a business where the difference between a correct read and an incorrect one was occasionally the difference between being alive and not, Dante Ricci had developed an instinct for the moment when a situation had moved outside his ability to control it. He was in that moment now. The room they gave him was on the south side of the floor, away from the elevator. King-sized bed. A leather couch. Floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Han River, the city on both banks, its lights doing their usual relentless work against the dark. A coffee machine that was better than the one in his actual apartment. A small refrigerator stocked with water and something that turned out to be fresh-pressed juice. Marco arrived at 4:15 in the morning with a bag, a face that was working very hard at being unreadable, and the particular quality of silence that he deployed when he had questions he had already decided not to ask. He set the bag on the leather couch. He looked around the room. He looked at Dante. "The doctor," he said. "Is it?" "Drop it." Marco held up both hands. A gesture that meant, dropped. But the thing about Marco was that dropped, for him, meant the words were gone but the attention remained. He had been trained by 11 years of working in proximity to a man who communicated primarily an implication to read the space around a statement rather than the statement itself. "Thursday," Marco said. "I will handle Thursday." Min Jun is already reaching out to the Verona intermediary. We can push to the following week without it reading as a retreat. Good. And the Calabreses? Dante looked at the window. At the city. "Let them wait," he said. "Waiting costs them more than it costs us." Marco nodded. He picked up his coat from where he had set it over the back of the chair. He paused at the door with the coat over his arm in the way that meant there was one more thing. "Boss," he said. Dante looked at him. "She is good," Marco said. "Whatever else?" "She is very good." Then he left. Dante stood at the window for a long time after the door closed. The city was moving into the hour before dawn, that specific flatness that preceded the sky deciding what color it was going to be. He put his hand against the glass. The glass was cold. On the other side of it, 14 floors below, the courtyard was empty. His sedan was gone. Marco would be back in the morning. He went to bed. He did not sleep. At 8 o'clock exactly there was a knock. He was already dressed, sitting on the leather couch with a coffee that had gone lukewarm and his phone in his hand, reviewing the previous night's messages without responding to any of them. The knock was 3 sharp, clinical sounds, and then the door opened before he had answered. Serena came in carrying 2 paper cups. She had changed her coat. This one looked pressed. Her name embroidered in the same dark thread. She held out one of the cups without preamble. "Cream, no sugar," she said. "Unless that changed." He took it. Said nothing about the fact that she remembered. She sat in the chair near the window, crossed her legs, the same way she had always sat when she was settling into a conversation that she intended to stay in, and opened the tablet she was carrying. "Tell me about the first blackout," she said. "Where were you? What were you doing immediately before it happened?" "A meeting. Supplier negotiations. Someone made a comment about my leadership." She looked up from the tablet. "What kind of comment?" "He said I was too young. That I was filling shoes too big for me. And that was disrespectful." His jaw was set. It was a negotiating tactic. An attempt to destabilize. Did it work? He was quiet for a moment. "I felt my vision start to go before I had time to respond," he said. Serena was watching him with that particular stillness. "Making no notes yet." "You said he wasn't wrong," she said. "Earlier." "You said." "I said the comment was disrespectful." "You said, that is not what I asked." She tilted her head a fraction of an inch. "That was me. 20 minutes ago, in the hallway. I am repeating it now." She waited. Was he wrong? The leather couch was comfortable. The coffee in his hand was good. Through the window, the city was fully into its morning version now, light on the river, traffic building, the distant sound of the city shifting from the version that operated in shadows to the version that operated in full daylight. "I was 26 when I took over," he said. The words came out differently than he expected them to. Flatter. "My father built his organization over 38 years. Every relationship, every arrangement, every piece of leverage he had, it took him 38 years. I had one night to decide whether to walk into it." He looked at the coffee in his hand. "I did not know what I was doing. I knew the vocabulary. I knew the structure. But the weight of it, the actual weight," he stopped. What did it feel like? Serena said. Like wearing something that did not fit. He set the coffee down. And doing it in front of people who knew exactly how well it was supposed to fit. She made a note. The man who made the comment, she said. He was one of those people. He had known my father for 20 years. So when he said you were filling shoes too big for you, he was not saying it as a tactic. The word came out before the calculation did, and Dante heard it land in the room and stayed still. He believed it. Serena said nothing. Let it breathe. Do you believe it? She said finally. The question sat in the room with a specific gravity. I have held my position for 12 years, he said. My organization is intact. My enemies are. That is not what I asked. He looked at her. She looked back. No, he said. I don't believe it. And then, 3 seconds later, lower, most of the time. Serena wrote something. Looked up. We are going to stop there for today, she said. He stared. That is it? That is it. You dragged me through that particular conversation to stop at that? I did not drag you. She closed the tablet. Stood. You walked into it voluntarily and said something true out loud, possibly for the first time. Your body needs a few hours to register that that did not kill you. She moved toward the door. Rest. Lunch will be delivered at 12:30. I will be back at 6. She was at the door. Serena. She waited. How do you do that? He said. Do what? Know when to stop. She was quiet for a moment. The morning light from the window was at an angle that caught the side of her face and the embroidery on her coat pocket and the particular expression she was wearing, which was one he did not have a name for but which he had been trying to name since she walked into the examination room 12 hours ago. I learned, she said, from watching people who didn't. She left. Dante sat in the room for a long time after. The coffee had gone fully cold. He drank it anyway. The days had a shape. 8 in the morning, Serena, 2 coffees, the chair by the window. Sessions that started in the present and moved, methodically, session by session, towards something that lived further back. Each one ending with the precise timing of a person who understood that there was a weight limit to what a conversation could carry before it began to collapse under itself. 6 in the evening, a shorter check-in. Vitals. Progress notes. Occasionally she stayed longer than the notes required, and when she did they talked about things that were not on any clinical form, the city, the particular architecture of a place that held certain memories in certain buildings, the way time moved differently when you were trying not to think about it. He did not black out. On the second night, at 2:17 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and went looking for it somewhere else. The VIP wing had a small lounge at the end of the corridor, 2 couches, a low table, windows that looked west across a different angle of the city. He had his phone and no particular destination when he turned the corner and found the lights already on. Serena was on the couch with a laptop. She was in different clothes, not her white coat, just dark pants and a shirt that was slightly rumpled in the way clothes get rumpled when you have been wearing them for too many hours, and she looked up when he appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone who had not expected company and was deciding in real time how to receive it. She closed the laptop. He sat in the chair across from her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Outside the window, the city was in its deepest register, the hour where everything that ran on momentum had run down, and what was left was structural. You are not supposed to be awake, she said. Neither are you. I am working. He looked at the closed laptop. She looked at it too. Then, why can't you sleep? He looked out at the city. The particular problem with the question was that there was an honest answer and he had not yet decided whether this room and this hour and the version of Serena Okafor sitting across from him in rumpled clothes with her laptop closed constituted a situation in which the honest answer was available. The second session today, he said instead. The things I said about my father. She waited. I have not said those things before. To anyone. I know. How do you know? Because of how hard you were working not to say them, she said. The amount of energy a person uses to not say something tells you exactly how long they have been not saying it. He was quiet for a moment. When I say things in those sessions, he said, where do they go? She looked at him with an expression that understood the question was not clinical. They go where you put them, she said. I make notes. I hold them professionally. But the weight of them, the actual weight, that stays with the person who said them. She paused. That is the work. He was quiet again. Why did you really come to this city? He said. I told you. You told me you moved forward. That is not the same as why here. He looked at her. You could have moved forward anywhere. The window held the city lights and the river and the specific flat dark of the hour between 2 and 3. Serena looked at it for a moment before she answered. Because it was the hardest one, she said. Because I had been to Seoul once, for a conference, 3 years before I moved here. And I had walked through Gangnam at 11 o'clock at night and felt something that I did not want to feel. And then I went back to the conference and I finished my presentation and I flew home and I spent the next 2 years applying for every position in this city that I was qualified for, because I have a problem with things that scare me. She looked at him. I walked toward them. The air in the room had changed. You should have been a different kind of person, she said. The kind I was afraid of instead of, she stopped. Instead of what? Instead of the kind that made me feel like I had found something I had not been looking for. She said it without softening it. Flat and honest as a diagnosis. And then it was gone. And I did not have the vocabulary for that, so I built one. I went to medical school and I built a very precise vocabulary for everything that happens to a human body and brain when it loses something it had named as safe. She looked at the laptop. That is why I am a neurologist. Dante looked at her for a long time. I looked for you, he said. After. She was very still. I came back to the apartment and you were gone. I tried the number you had given me. No, she said. You did not. Serena. Your apartment was cleared in 48 hours. Her voice was steady. Your phone was disconnected. There was no forwarding address. The people who had known you at the university, your study group, the people you had been friends with, they had all received the same information, which was nothing. She looked at him directly. You did not look for me. You removed all possibility of being found, and then you disappeared, and I looked for you. A pause. I was the one who looked. The silence after that was not comfortable. It was the kind of silence that has weight and texture and edges. I know, he said. She waited. He looked at the window. At the city that had held her for 7 years without his knowing. At the lights along the river. At his own hands on the arms of the chair. I am sorry, he said. It came out without the architecture he would usually build around something like that, no preamble, no positioning, no careful management of how it landed. Just the 2 words, flat and direct and completely without the kind of performance that he had spent 12 years attaching to everything he said. Serena looked at him for a long time. Apologies are information, she said finally. They tell you what a person knows about what they did. They don't tell you anything about what they would do again. She stood. She picked up her laptop. I need to get back to work. Serena. She paused. What did I do? Not a question. A statement that was also a question. Specifically. What did I do that I am apologizing for? The pause before she answered was long enough that the city outside the window shifted, a truck somewhere, traffic lights cycling, the invisible machinery of a sleeping city rearranging itself. You decided, she said, that you knew what I could handle. And you made that decision for me. Without asking. She looked at him. I have spent 9 years being the most qualified person in every room I have walked into and fighting to be seen as exactly that. And the one person who ever made me feel like that was not a fight. She stopped. Started again. You took the choice away from me. That is what you did. Then she was gone. Down the corridor. Her footsteps disappearing into the carpet. Dante sat in the lounge with the city lights and the closed laptop she had not taken. She had left it on the couch. He realized she would have to come back for it, and he sat there for a long time thinking about choices and the specific cost of making them for other people and what it meant that she had just said to him, clearly and without flinching, the thing he had been not saying to himself for 8 years. On the morning of the third day, Serena came in at 8 with the coffee and without the tablet. She sat down. She looked at him. "Your father," she said. His hands tightened around the cup. The city was fully bright outside the window now. Morning in full effect, the river glittering under it, the traffic building on both banks. The room had the quality of a space that had held something difficult and had not collapsed under it. The door burst open. Neither of them had heard it coming. Marco stood in the doorway, breathing harder than his usual controlled pace, his face carrying the particular configuration that meant the outside world had just moved without permission. "Boss." He looked at Serena, then back at Dante, and made the decision that circumstances outweighed protocol. "We have a problem." Dante was on his feet before Marco finished the sentence. The man from 3 minutes ago, the one sitting in a hospital chair with something cracked open in his chest, looking at the river, was gone. In his place was the version that 12 years had built, shoulders back, expression sealed, voice dropping to its flattest register. "Tell me." "A doctor in the cardiology unit." "Ferraro." Marco held up his phone. "He had access to your file." "All of it." "The sessions." "Dr. Okafor's notes." "The diagnoses." His jaw tightened. "The Calabrese family has been in contact with him for 2 weeks. They paid off his gambling debts. He gave them everything." The temperature in the room changed. "How much do they have?" Dante said. "Everything. Every session note. The diagnosis. The recommendation for observation." Marco looked at the phone. "They have sent a message. 72 hours. If you do not step down from your position and announce a voluntary transition, they send the file to every crew from Incheon to Busan." Dante's expression did not change. That was the thing, nothing in his face moved. But his right hand, hanging at his side, curled slowly into a fist and then, deliberately, uncurled. He turned to Serena. She was already on her phone. Already in motion. "Security," she said, her voice ice and clarity in equal measure, "this is Dr. Okafor. I need you to locate and detain Dr. Ferraro from the cardiology department. Do not let him leave the building." A pause. "I don't care what floor he is on. Find him." She hung up. She turned. Found Dante looking at her. "In this hospital," she said, "in this wing, what Ferraro did is my problem. I will handle my problem." She looked at him with an expression that was simultaneously professional and something else entirely. "You are going to need to handle yours." He looked at her for a moment. "Serena," he said. "I know," she said. She did not say what she knew. She did not need to. The room was full of it, the specific, charged understanding of two people who were standing at the edge of something that the last 72 hours had been quietly building toward, and who both understood that what was outside the door was about to make everything inside it much more complicated. "This is going to get worse before it gets better," he said. "Things that are worth anything usually do," she said. Marco was looking at the ceiling in the way he looked at the ceiling when he was giving two people a private conversation without leaving the room. Dante reached for his jacket. The one Marco had brought 3 days ago, hanging on the back of the door. He put it on. Straightened it. The transformation, from patient to the other thing, took approximately 4 seconds and was visible in the spine first, then the shoulders, then the face. "Marco," he said. "Set up the meeting. I want everyone available, tonight." He looked at the phone Marco was holding. "And I want everything we have on Ferraro's contact with the Calabreses. Every communication. Every transfer. Already pulling it, Marco said. Dante turned to Serena one more time. She was standing at the window. The light was behind her. The city was behind her. Her arms were crossed in the way they crossed when she was thinking through a problem from the inside, and she was looking at him with an expression that he had been trying to name for 3 days and had finally, in this moment, found the correct word for. She was not afraid. In 12 years, the number of people who had stood in the same room as the version of Dante Ricci that was currently buttoning his jacket and looked at him the way she was looking at him could be counted on no fingers. She was not afraid of any of it. Tonight, he said. After the meeting. I am coming back. I will be here, she said. I am always here. He held her gaze for one more second. Then he walked out the door with Marco half a step behind him, and the corridor absorbed them, and the elevator doors opened and then closed, and Serena stood at the window of his hospital room looking at the city that had held them both for 7 years without their knowing and pressed her fingers flat against the glass. Cold on the other side. The city going about its enormous, indifferent business. She stayed at the window for a long time. Then she took her hand back, picked up her tablet, and went to find Ferraro. 3 months later. Dante's office was on the 42nd floor of a building in Yungu that everyone in the city knew was a front and no one had ever been able to prove it. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A desk that had belonged to his father and that he had kept because it was the correct size for the room, not because of what it meant, or so he told himself on the days when he stood behind it and felt the weight of the wood under his hands and understood that there was no version of that explanation that was entirely honest. No blackouts in 11 weeks. Marco delivered the morning report with the specific quality of efficiency that meant things were running well. The Calabrese situation had resolved itself in the way situations resolve themselves when the legal case against them is airtight and the prosecutor's office is motivated and the evidence of their involvement in a medical records breach is documented in enough detail to keep their lawyers occupied for the next several years. The city was his again, in all the ways that mattered. That's the last of the Incheon updates, Marco said. The arrangement with the Verona contact confirmed yesterday. We are ahead of schedule. Good. Marco gathered his papers. Paused. He had been pausing at the end of morning reports for 3 weeks. Dante had not asked why. Boss, Marco said. Whatever you are about to say. She took the fellowship, Marco said. Geneva. Word came through the hospital network this morning. She leaves in 6 days. The office was very quiet. I know, Dante said. Marco looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded once, in the way he nodded when he understood something and was going to respect it, and he left. Dante stood at the window for a long time. He had known about Geneva for 3 weeks. Had known she was considering it. Had sat across from her in her office on the 4th floor of Meridian, not as a patient, not in any capacity that had a professional name, and listened to her talk about the research and what it meant and what it had taken to build toward it, and he had felt, clearly and precisely, 2 completely incompatible things at the same time. He had not told her what he felt. He had told her to take it. Because the thing about understanding, for the first time and correctly, what it means to let someone choose, is that it applies even when the choice costs you the most. He picked up his phone. Dialed. She answered on the 3rd ring. I heard, he said. A pause. Marco. Marco. Another pause. Then, Dante. Take it, he said. I am not going to be the reason you don't take it. He looked out at the city. You built toward this for 6 years. You came to this city to prove something. You proved it. Go do the next thing. The silence on the line was the kind that a person holds something inside. You should have been like this 8 years ago, she said, and her voice was not quite steady. I know, he said. I am practicing. She was quiet for a moment. I do not know what Geneva means for, she stopped. It means you go, he said. And I am still here. That is all it needs to mean right now. He heard her breathe. I will come to say goodbye, she said. I know you will, he said. She did. 3 days before her flight. His office, 7 in the evening, the city going amber in the late light. She came alone and she sat across from him and they talked for 2 hours about nothing that directly addressed what they both understood was happening, and then she stood up and she crossed the room and she kissed him, not with urgency, not with grief, but with the specific quality of something true that has finally been placed where it belongs. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. 5 things, she said. Whenever it gets loud. I know, he said. Dante. I know. She left. He stood at his window and watched the city turn into night. 6 months after that. The morning report was finished. Marco was gone. The office was quiet in a specific way. It was quiet on mornings when the operations were running smoothly and there was no crisis requiring immediate attention and the day was going to be primarily administrative. Dante was at his desk when the door opened again. Marco, with a small package. No return address, Marco said. Geneva postmark. He set it on the desk. Dante looked at it for a moment. Then he opened it. Inside, a photograph, printed on regular paper, slightly creased at one corner. The entrance to a medical facility. White walls. A flag above the door. Morning light coming from the east, long and flat against the facade. He turned it over. Her handwriting. 5 words. 5 things I can see. Nothing else. Dante sat with it for a long time. The office held its particular quiet around him. Below the window, the city ran its usual arithmetic, moving, calculating, never stopping. He stood up. Went to the wall beside the window. Pressed the photograph flat against it and reached for a pen from the desk drawer. The only personal object in the room. He stepped back and looked at it. Then he picked up his phone. Marco. His voice was its usual register. The Busan sit down, push it to Thursday. I have calls this morning. He set the phone down. He sat at his desk. He worked. But sometimes, between calls, between the calculations that filled the hours of a life built on precision and leverage and the specific kind of patience that his father had taught him and that he had spent 12 years misapplying, he looked at the photograph. And he did not feel like a man still waiting. He felt like a man who had, finally, learned how. If this story took something out of you, the good kind of out, subscribe right now. Not later. Now. Because I have more stories exactly like this one. Stories that know exactly where the nerve is. Stories that will make you feel everything you came here to feel. You found this channel for a reason. Stay.